Okay, there we go. Okay, so why don't we start with a quick welcome? So for everybody in the room and virtually speaking, welcome to the Germinator. This is a bi-weekly um, kind of informal coffee chat, guest speaking series, whatever you want to call it. And I just invite people I know and get to know and ask them to stop by and talk about anything about innovation, commercialization, entrepreneurship, and anything in between. And I called it the Germinator, kind of playing on this idea of, you know, incubation and how we grow stuff and like an idea, something that grows and you see a lot of the incubators kind of say it's like, oh, it's like a little seedling that will grow and become a full mature tree one day. So for me, the germinator is the before the plant or the seed actually sprouts. So this idea of just, if we have a seeds, we have to germinate them before they can actually become a plant. So it's like open space for chatting and discussing. And isn't it the most appropriate place to do this in Kelowna, which is so agriculturally oriented? So we are here on Seal Okanagan territory. Um, this is a beautiful, gorgeous valley. I moved here from Toronto just about 2 years and change. And I'm still learning a lot about the land, a lot about the culture, a lot about the importance of the land to the people, both newcomers, guests like myself, and people who've been traditionally living here for generations and thousands of years. Um, so really, really amazing to have people like Nathan and from everywhere else in the world join us and get to know Kelowna and the Seal territory just a bit better. I also can't be remiss if I would be grateful for ETSI Economic Trust for Southern Interior Development Fund for giving some little cash for us to feed people who actually show up in person and get to eat some snacks on the table. And our guest for today, Nathan. I actually know Nathan back when I was in the University of Toronto Impact Center. He was working back then in a company called Lumentra, which was about LED lighting service company. They had a really fancy big sphere that you can go in and live in it. It was that big, but it was actually just used for measuring LED lights. And I actually knew Nanoleaf before Nathan joined Nanoleaf, and then Nathan joined Nanoleaf. So I think that kind of ties a lot of the different strands of discussions I've had with people over the years about entrepreneurship and commercialization. So it's really fun to have Nathan today and share a bit about his experience with, I guess, the lighting industry, thinking about lighting from a commercialization point of view. I guess we just take lights for granted. We don't really think about what it takes to get it on the shelf in a way that people actually want to buy it. So maybe kind of poking you a bit about thinking of lighting beyond the necessity for light and illumination, I guess. So yeah, so why don't I stop rambling here and pass the buck to Nathan. So I'm gonna stop sharing my slides and put the pin on replace pin to Nathan so we can all see you. So Nathan, why don't you start by just quickly telling us about yourself, about how you ended up at Nanoleaf, and maybe a bit about what Nanoleaf is all about.
Sure. So I guess I could start with myself. So I studied engineering. I imagine like some of you, perhaps not all of you, but I studied at Waterloo and then McGill for my master's. As Alon mentioned, we crossed paths first at the Impact Center at the University of Toronto. So the company that Alon mentioned, Lumentra, was this lighting test services company, a lighting test lab. I'll back up a half a step there, and like my passion from my studies was all around kind of light and like semiconductor devices and kind of integrated electronic devices that function with light. So I actually did my master's around something called dye sensitized solar cells. It was a kind of a chemist's dream for how to build stuff. In practice, I don't know if it's really hit markets. It spawned off some new technologies, which I haven't kept abreast with. But I was very interested in light and kind of the semiconductor aspect. So whether it's solar cells, whether it's LEDs. So I landed at Lumentra doing the service side of things. It was a small company. I think there was 4 of us full time, 2 in Toronto at the Impact Center and 2 in Waterloo with a satellite test lab that was acquired. And yeah, it was kind of my first real startup. 4 people, small sort of thing. I've worked at smaller companies through my co-ops and it's a small stint before that. But yeah, I really like that kind of small aspect, wearing multiple hats. But I think my transition over to Nanoleaf was really around a desire to move into products. So Lumentra was very service oriented. There were certain product things that we were kind of looking at, but at the end of the day, with a team of 4, 5, including our CEO, who's only part-time, there's only so much you can focus on. But Nanoleaf was kind of this darling. So it was a U of T startup, the 3 co-founders, of which I'm not, they met at U of T, they were on the solar car team, kind of mid-2000s. And then around 2009, they started working on this like integrated, what they call the nanogrid, which is, it was intended to be an off-grid power source, power supply. You can bring it around. It has a solar panel built in. You can plug in your electronics or whatever you need. And they also had this, along the path, they built this light bulb. So the nanogrid as a product for them never took off. It was kind of not the right timing for technology. You can actually find a whole bunch of Kickstarters from like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago that now I actually have the same idea from what they originally did. But this like this light bulb that they built was actually the world's most energy efficient light bulb. So they kickstarted that in 2012. Well, maybe it was 2013. The Kickstarter actually came out, and that bulb was in this Lumentra test lab. It was kind of like the coolest thing that we had, and everyone kind of like looked at Nanoleaf as like the prototype of a successful startup, coming out of U of T science side of things anyway. But anyway, a couple opportunities came up, and I joined Nanoleaf 2015, just before my daughter was born the next year. But it was like we like moved downtown. I changed jobs to Nanoleaf, and then shortly after we had a baby on the way. So it's a huge bunch of life changes all at once. But yeah, maybe that's a good place to stop and kind of pass it back to you along.
Yeah, and a few things that you kind of brought up, which is part of when I talk to students and faculty, not just in these informal settings, but also in the classroom, about the difference, I guess, just from an experience from a business perspective, a service company versus a product company. There's a guy based in the US in one of, I think it's a community college or something, and he writes these monthly LinkedIn blogs, and he wrote one a couple of months ago, celebrating service-based companies and really highlighting how service companies and service-based startups is an overlooked opportunity for a lot of entrepreneurs who think, I need to build a product, I need to manufacture it and box it and ship it. Where if you start with service, it's sometimes, not always, but sometimes it actually is a lot more manageable, at least initially. So because you straddle both worlds, I know maybe a good start before we go focus too much on Nanoleaf experience. What has been some of the observations that you saw, the difference between working for a service company like Lumentra that tests LEDs, as opposed to now a company that is creating a product, which is an LED?
Yeah. So I was at Lumentra for about a year, well, as opposed to my now coming close to 8 years at Nanoleaf. But something did jump to mind, because I think like at Lumentra, what we were primarily serving, we were, generally testing lights as Alon mentioned. Specifically, why we were testing them is there's a bunch of commercial tax credits around energy efficient lighting. I haven't, again, kept up with whether those still exist. I imagine if they do, they've at least dwindled. But the idea there is, like, as manufacturers of lighting products, you had to test to a certain quality of performance, energy efficacy, and therefore you could sell under this what's called a DLC at the time, which qualified your buyers for tax credits. So our customers were those lighting manufacturers. Many of them were kind of locally oriented. There was, ones in Guelph. I guess you guys are big BCs, so you probably don't know all of the GTA and surrounding area. So I think, like, in normally with services, you normally have competitors. For us, we certainly did, but like we more or less had a monopoly in our geographical area. But at the same time, you still have to make sure your customers are happy, and like part of my role naturally was interfacing with all these customers, whether it was like, coordinating what test results they needed, what products were coming in, what things that they maybe needed that was out of the normal. So yeah, like outside of like actually just doing the work of the testing and kind of building out whatever processes there was some kind of interfacing with the customer side of things. So kind of jumping over then to the Nanoleaf side, naturally, like, my responsibilities now as Chief Product Officer are very broad. I oversee all of our product strategy, product execution. So there's a lot of things that fall onto my plate, at least eventually. But when I started at Nanoleaf, I was basically responsible for two things. One thing to start, which was we did an SDTC proposal for it's a federal funding agency that gives money to sustainable technologies. The idea there was we're going to take like this energy efficient light bulb and put it in a whole bunch of different form factors and couple that up with some intelligent software and wireless control, which is a lot of what Nanoleaf has built over the years. We're still working on some of it, but anyway, so this SDTC project was the proposal I was writing, working closely with the CTO at the time. But alongside of that, at least the first product that I worked on was our very first smart home product. So Nanoleaf, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the smart home area. You've got your Amazon Alexa, you've got your Google Home, and then you've got Apple HomeKit. A lot of those, there's some newer stuff that we work on, but at the time, those were the big three. And HomeKit was announced, and basically we had this like light bulb and hub. It used Zigbee, and we were trying to be first to market with HomeKit. So product management is what actually I probably closely align with, although I oversee a lot of different functions. But I basically just fell into the product management role. So I was doing this SDTC proposal, product management. But the interesting part about product management, and where I'll tie it back to services, is we had to work with all of these external partners. So like HomeKit is basically a developer technology provided by Apple. They made updates. They still sort of make updates, but it's more or less been superseded by a newer technology now called Matter. But at the time, it was like WWDC, which is like, if you guys follow Apple stuff, that's where they announce all of their iPhone software. They used to announce hardware, but now it's all software based. But anyway, so I had to work with like our contacts at Apple to like make sure that this product could come off the ground in 2015. And then that culminated, end of year, just barely got it in, to Best Buy. It was like 5 stores in all of Canada. We didn't get it anywhere else. And I thought it was such an amazing achievement at the end of 2015. But that interface with our partners, whether it be Apple, whether it be Amazon, whether it be Google, that's become a very core part of what I do. And I think a lot of that stuff was seeded, from that experience at Lumentra, where my interface as a effectively a salesperson for these services, with all of our different lighting manufacturers. So it's a different aspect of it, understanding who your customer is, understanding what they need, understanding what will drive, business growth in the early days.
So it sounds like, I guess, the focus on relationship building, whether you're offering service to customers and you need to build a relationship and a rapport, earn their trust, because they're your customers and you offer service for fee, or you're developing a product, but the product doesn't exist in a vacuum. It has to exist connected to other players in the market. So you have to maintain these relationships for what we, I guess, would be a joint beneficial, relationship with these other companies. And I guess, I don't know, I think we spend a lot of time talking about technical skills and calculations and design, problem solving, but not as much as how do you build relationships, for any different purpose. So I don't know if anybody has any questions either online or in the room about that part of the experience. Yeah.
So how did he actually approach Apple when he went to build the relationship with them?
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting experience. I think a lot of Apple's developer relations is self-service, especially on like if you want to build an iOS app, like basically you kind of read the docs and go to it. Apple obviously provides some paid level of support, as well as normal support. For HomeKit, it was a little different. So HomeKit falls under what's called their MFI program, which originally was made for iPod, kind of morphed into made for iPhone, or now it's just kind of their catch-all thing. So like today, if you bought something that works with their Find My program or their Car Key program or still HomeKits, all of that falls under the MFI banner, and there's a whole bunch of technologies that get built in there. So we were assigned a rep that kind of helped walk us through that phase. But I think the interesting thing where it really, I think, probably differentiated us from just some of the other MFI players or HomeKit players at that time. So we went to CES in 2016, Consumer Electronics Show. It happens in Vegas every January. So 2016 was the first time I ever got to go. It was pretty amazing. Very, very unique experience if you guys are interested in consumer electronics. But we took this MFI rep and a couple of their people out to lunch. And this was not even my idea. This was my CEO's. He was, I've learned a lot from him around kind of the aspects of relationship building. Yeah, we went to this steakhouse, like probably completely, not what we would normally do as a startup with limited funds. But anyway, it kind of set the tone, and face to face, it's hard to kind of recreate that, which is certainly a topic now with post pandemic and how hybrid works out versus face to face. But in the world of business, face to face goes a long way. So I don't know, that sort of answers your question, maybe. I think there's a lot of other pieces to it that just kind of boil down to like working through the technical problems and making things work. I mean, there's a couple of other stories I could tell around, the pivots we had to make, leading into that first product. But I don't know if that's what you want to focus on yet, or whatever along.
Yeah, well, we can go naturally to where the conversation goes, I guess. I don't know. Anybody want to follow up on that question before we talk about the product part? Yes, online maybe? There are a few people online. Anybody has any question at this point? Or you all want to hear that? Yeah, want to see the inside of the product, what it looks like on the inside.
Yeah.
So why don't we talk about the Nanoleaf? I guess the thing to me that probably the most interesting part, talking about the Nanoleaf, and I think we can see that behind you, right? These are the hexagons.
So these are what do we call our elements? So they're hexagonal, as you mentioned. These ones specifically have a wood veneer, so they don't go full color. We have a tunable white, cool to warm. So on the cool side, it kind of looks like clouds, and then on the warm side, it looks a little bit more like fire. So these are like aimed at a little bit more of a nuanced, I guess, aesthetic. Something that fits into this kind of whites and wood backgrounds, but something that, actually from a demographic standpoint, we were trying to target women a little bit more. I think, the flashy color changing triangles and hexagons that, we had before this product in particular, they appeal very heavily to male demographics and kind of the gamer side of things. But we wanted to expand our product offering. But yeah, I guess the general question is like, how did this come about, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. So yeah, like I think I talked a little bit about our HomeKit journey in the early days, and how we landed that first partner around Apple and built ourselves a relationship that we could build on top of, and that's actually kind of spun out into like, we sell in the Apple retail store globally. We do get preferred placement in certain places. It's been a great business relationship. But coming back to kind of the panels, right? So that first CES in 2016, we had this, like, we called it the Aurora to begin with. That's actually what we launched the product name under, and we changed it to Light Panels Along the Path. But the Aurora we put, and actually, Alon, I don't know if you can give me screen share privileges. I don't think I did as a participant, but I'm happy to show some. So yeah, we went to CES in 2016 to just paint the picture. If you guys have never been to a large trade show, it's usually mayhem, and CES is the most mayhem of them, I think. Not that I've been to lots, but it's just wild. So like the trade floor is very large. It takes you, I would say, a good 4 to 5 hours just to walk all of it if you actually want to see every booth, and probably longer if you actually want to like just do more than just glance at a booth. But our booth was like, startup salary, startup, budget, smallest possible thing you could get in the back left corner, the furthest from the door. Like it's like pretty much, I don't know if you call it the worst. Yeah, that's actually, I don't know if you've heard this story, but we were close to the bathroom, so that was our only saving grace. It may have actually been a really great positive. But anyway, so we had this product called the Aurora. It was actually a prototype. It was like proof of concept. We kind of weren't sure. It was very different from like, this energy efficient light bulb, lighting automation front, that kind of led us to this. But yeah, we got picked up by CNET. So hopefully you guys are familiar with CNET. I feel like they're getting a little long in the tooth, but they used to be much, much larger. I feel like they've reinvented themselves even now, but anyway, they picked us up. They put us on their front page. She's showing our panels here, the original triangles, which we called the Aurora. This is the hub that I was talking about. So I think they covered the whole booth. But basically, this kind of like kickstarted, not actually, because we did actually kickstart the company a few years earlier. But this really kickstarted our successful product line. So we took this back after January and like, basically went turbo mode to get it into market, by Q4 of that year of 2016. So if you guys have ever seen Nanoleaf stuff, this is probably what you've seen. We've followed this up with squares. For squares, actually, we added rhythm, which is our kind of dance to music interaction. And then in 2019. Trying to get my dates straight. I think it was in early 2020 that we released shapes, and then elements came a little bit later in 2021. So yeah, it's spun off a whole bunch of different pieces. The way the product works, if you're not familiar with it, is as you can see, all of these panels connect together edge to edge. There's a dedicated controller that runs all of our software. Everything gets detected automatically. It gets shown in our app exactly as you've built it. Out of the box without doing anything, just plugging everything in, and it starts to run beautiful, colored scenes. And yeah, our app has a bunch of features to create your own or to share and discover others, and connect up to all the different ecosystems. So these all work with your major smart home players, Apple HomeKit, Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, Samsung SmartThings. And we've built a number of integrations over the years to make sure that it's as easily accessible for whichever platform you might use. But yeah, no, I think in terms of like what we see as Nanoleaf as guiding lights, I think the early days were all around energy efficiency. And with the success of this product, it's certainly changed. I mean, the purpose of this product is not specifically to give you energy efficient lights. It's really for smart home decor and kind of the experiential parts of it. So I think, Alon, you mentioned I work in the lighting industry, but I think with your accent, it almost sounded, it was either the accent or the Zoom, digitization. It sounded like delighting industry, which is, it's actually kind of close to where we see ourselves today, right? So we talk a lot internally about being at the interface between arts and technology. So because I think the reality is the way people use our wall products in particular is around interior decor and honestly a work of art, right?
So I think I should probably run fast and trademark the term delighting industry.
Right. Yeah.
But this
we'll have to fight you for the trademark later.
Is it me saying it or you mishearing it that counts? But when I teach innovation in my courses, I always tell my students, and I picked this up from one of my colleagues at York University, that innovation is creating something new that people love. And I think Nanoleaf's experience or just approach for the delighting process, if you think about it, intuitively we think of light or the light bulb as functional only, right? And the only time where you think of lighting fixture as decorative is separate from the light source, right? It's like there's the chandelier, which is decorative. You have the floor standing lamp that is artistically designed, and then you put the light source in it, right? So I think before LEDs, the light source was always the functional piece to the artistic part. And LED really shifted that balance to think about the light source built in to be more decorative. And you're an engineer, but now you really have to think of the functional as not even the main selling point at this point, right? I mean, functional, it has to be functional, but that's not really the selling point anymore. How do you retrain your brain to think? And you're the chief product officer, so that's like on you. So how do you unlearn and relearn that approach?
I think like it's certainly follows the arc of what I've worked on since coming to Nanoleaf. So like I said, when I started, I wrote this SDTC proposal, which was laser focused on what sort of energy can we save through this new technology. And SDTC, they fund projects as broad as new soil technology that's going to cut down on, I don't know, nitrates or something that's negative. Don't quote me on that. It's not my area of expertise. To stuff like us, which is admittedly, I think our original proposal was not nearly as, we had this triangle in that proposal as kind of like an appendix, like, by the way, here's this interesting thing that might also help hospitality industry, but it was not the focus. And then kind of tracing that towards today, where what we do today is far more experiential. I think like that word experiential is really what unifies things. So we actually just announced at CES this past year what we're calling our Sense Plus line. And for me, that's probably actually the culmination of what I wrote in that original proposal. So what our Sense Plus line is, it's a set of motion sensing control points. So basically your smart switches on the wall with motion sensors built in, as well as a a battery operated equivalent, which we call a wireless dimmer. So the idea there is that you couple these things. Obviously a smart switch on the wall controls whatever's on the circuit already, whether it's smart or not, and then this wireless dimmer gets coupled up with either our light bulbs or the products on the wall, or the smart switch itself, sort of like a three-way in lighting terms. But the purpose of this line is what I call automation out of the box. So it's basically trying to bring motion and occupancy sensing. It's trying to bring ambient light sensing and build those as kind of the user expectations for smart lighting moving forward. So if you guys ever bought smart lighting today, probably you care about voice control. It's definitely what brought us into the smart lighting side of things with Siri and HomeKit. It's really cool, but it's the sort of thing where at the end of the day, you're not going to be yelling at a voice assistant to turn every light on and off. You're probably still going to use the switch, just naturally the way we've all been conditioned. And of course, there's scheduling. You want your lights to turn on at 7 a.m. or turn off at 10 p.m., whatever. That's kind of basic. Whenever I tell the story internally, I was like, when I was a kid, we'd go on vacation and we would put our little dial and connect it up to the lamps or the Christmas lights, and it would turn the lights on at 7 p.m. and turn them off at 10. This was mid 90s. I try not to date myself. I'll turn 35 in 2 days, but so these things have been around for a while. Even voice control, you got the clapper. Have you guys ever seen the clapper? There's this thing in I feel like it was product placement in Home Alone. And they clap and the lights turn off. That's early 90s. So it's that's kind of almost the precursor to voice control. But anyway, the concepts of lighting automation out of the box is what I want to see in the future is that you never have to touch your lights. They're always on when you need them. If it's broad daylight in the middle of the day, they don't need to be on because it's already bright in your room. And then of course, if you leave, the lights will just turn off or dim, depending on the use case. And I really want that to be super accessible for users. So that's the idea behind our Sense Plus line. And that's where kind of the energy efficiency meets the experiential part, because whether it resonates for you guys, I think there's a lot of places in futuristic movies where it's always the user walks into the room and the lights just kind of turn on, or they're walking down a hallway and it's going on ahead of them. These are the sorts of experiences that I want to build. Things that eventually fade into the background, but things that you don't buy them because you're saving a couple bucks a year on your energy bill. You buy them because it's just the future of the experience side. And of course, if you get both, then it's even better. But
ironically, I just saw Back to the Future 2 with my daughter 2 nights ago, and it was, the movie came out in late 80s. So I think the first one came out in 85, the last one came out in 90. So this would have been, late 1980s. And I'm going to date myself. I'm going to turn 45 this summer. So I was the 10-year-old boy back then when it came out. And so I got to watch it at cinema. And so in that one of those scenes, the Jennifer from 1985, who happens to miraculously find herself in 2015, the future, walks into the door. Well, 2 cops help her go into the door because she was found that, she got sedated. But the officer said, oh, you really need to program your lighting to turn on when you walk in through the door, because they open the door, they walk in, it's all dark, and they help her sit down on the sofa, and the lights don't come on, and said, oh, you really need to work on your programming of your home lighting, so the lights on when you're going in. And so she's kind of dazingly saying, oh, lights on, and the lights go on. But it really speaks to it really speaks to that experience, right? The difference between a switch versus voice command versus smart programming, that you open the door, the lights are there for you. You don't need to even think about it. It just intuitively walks with you, right?
Yeah.
And that was 2015, the future. We're behind, I guess.
Yeah, and we're always it's a classic flying car stuff that has never quite materialized yet. So
Anybody has any questions to Nathan about all the stuff that we talked about? I'm actually still intrigued about the wood veneer behind you, but I'm gonna let the students ask any questions.
How many different styles of those light panels are there?
So it depends on how you count. What we sell today, we've got the hexagons that are in my picture. We have a lineup called shapes. So there's actually 3 different shapes that exist there. There's a hexagon, a triangle, and then a small triangle. We've discontinued our original, what we call light panels. We have a product in between that's released 2018 called Canvas, which is a square. And then our latest, well, relatively most recent wall product is called our lines. And then there's 2 different variants there. So the lines can even be put in a hexagon. I should probably just show this on our websites. Give me a second here. Share my screen again.
And are they compatible with each other?
It depends what you mean by compatible with each other. They all function together in our app, so you can control them, simultaneously from our app. They don't plug together. Our shapes line does, and our elements actually can be mixed with our shapes. But otherwise, our canvas and our lines, those are separate. Like they can't be mixed and matched off the same power supply, like electrically. This is a boring picture, but this is what our lines look like. So there's you can either get these connectors that give you kind of 30 or 60 degree angles, or actually I should say increments of 60 degree angles, or you can get what's called lines squared, which give you 90 degree increments. Yeah.
What is the service life of these products, approximately?
The lifetime?
Yeah.
So if you've ever bought a light bulb, you'll notice, it might say 30,000 hours or something like that. This is actually something that I used to do. This was part of Lumentra. So the way that LED lifetime works is that they will test the actual LED package, like the little 5x5 millimeter LED components. And they'll test its outputs over the period of, I think it's, I don't know. It's like, I think 30 days or something like that, or maybe 90 days. It's a relatively short period of time. You can imagine some of these kind of boil out to like 30 years of service time. So anyway, they test this measurement over this period, and then they use an extrapolation method to get to 30,000 hours or 50,000 hours or maybe 100,000 hours. So the short story, I think, is I believe on our spec sheet, it probably says something like 25 or 30,000 hours. I have to double check. My personal view is those kind of estimates aren't meaningful until you actually get to that date. There's a variety of things that can go wrong, just generally, not specifically to our products. I mean, when you're talking about such long periods of time, but sufficient to say it's quite long in terms of compared to maybe a 1,000 hour light bulb that you would used to buy in the incandescent days.
And I don't know much about lighting, but is the difference between, I was just thinking the difference between LED and like a normal light bulb you see, like would LED just like go out once it reaches like the lifetime like a normal light bulb, or would it just like be dimmer but still like usable?
Right. So that's, I think the way that the extrapolation is structured, it was basically trying to figure out when the LED would get to 70% of its original brightness. So, maybe in your home, it doesn't matter so much if the light goes down to 70%, when likely you probably don't even notice. Like there's actually been studies that people can't notice the difference between full and half brightness. But from like a commercial standpoint, like a regulation standpoint, there's this field of study called lighting design, where literally, whether you're designing lighting for a roadway or whether you're designing it for a classroom, there's actually standards that require a certain amount of lighting. So basically 70% is the cutoff for most LEDs. I'd say there's like, there's a bunch of other probably more catastrophic failure mechanisms. Maybe your lighting driver or your power supply stops working at a certain point. But generally speaking, yeah, the LEDs just sort of get dimmer, like you said.
Awesome. And I guess one more question. So when you design these kind of products, is there any like user experience that goes into it? Like, is there a way that you can measure like how aesthetic your product is, for example? Like how do you how do you do that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So on our team, we have a bunch of product designers. I would say traditionally, these product designers would be called industrial designers to kind of do the form factor of the device, and then user experience designers who typically are in the digital world concerned with app and user interfaces and desktop apps and such. I think in our company, it's definitely a unique offering. I think you look at other hardware companies, like we've got a close relationship with Eero, which is the mesh router system, and a variety of other hardware companies. If you look at Eero, like they have industrial designers, but like at the end of the day, it's mostly an enclosure for their router. Whereas for us, the actual visual elements of the lighting fixture, like what Alon said, the advent of LED has changed it from like just a light bulb that you put into a fixture, which is beautiful, or a fixture that might kind of do something interesting, and now you can actually do something directly that's interesting with the light source. So we have a very talented team of product designers. We have also a very talented design team. Pretty much everything you see on our website that I just showed, it's all rendered. So it's like basically we have the equivalent of the guys who work on Avatar on our team, doing visual stuff behind the scenes. From what I understand, we actually pay better than the guys who work on Avatar. But it's a different question, a different topic. But no, we have a very talented team that's have far better eye for aesthetics than I do, as a very pragmatic engineer. But yeah.
So thank you.
And kind of circling back to that comment, and in my entrepreneurship course, one of the things that we talk about is how do you reduce the risk of manufacturing something that nobody would actually want to buy. And one of the classic example is you create a graphical rendering of what the product would look like, and you put it on the website and see if people are pre-ordering it. So you design it, you render it, and it looks realistic, and you add it to your own product line, and you said, we're planning to launch this in whatever realistic or unrealistic timeline in the future, and ask people to put credit card information to pre-order. And so if you don't reach a threshold, there is no reason for you to do it. And if you fail to, you go back to the relatively small number of people, say, we apologize, we decided not to go ahead with this product line. It's a small number of people, so it's not a big thing. But if you get enough people, then yes, let's build it and ship it.
Yeah, the advent of crowdfunding. I think for us, we're always kind of caught between like how much of this should we actually show up front. I mean, I think in our line of products, we've built ourselves what's called a technology moat. So like what we've actually built into the software of our panels and all of the integrations that support it, that actually makes it hard for just your average copycat to just do the same thing and have a product that works in market. But at the same time, with a very innovative or unique visual product idea, I mean, the time to market is like, I think I told the story about our CES, right? It's like we had this prototype at CES in January, and we like got it out by the end of the year. That is incredibly fast. Like some companies have a 2 to 3 year timeline. We try and keep ours as narrow and quick as possible, but but yeah, so I guess my point being is like we are actually quite hesitant to like put early concepts out to the public. But having said that, I've talked to other companies and they're like, yeah, we've like literally just run fake Facebook ads and figured out which ones kind of have the best click through, and then we've chosen our design based off that. So that was surprising to me. We've we've talked about it, but we've never actually gone through and pulled the trigger on that.
Yeah, but even before the digital age, right? I mean, a lot of companies would have created a prototype,
Yeah.
show up at an exhibition, a trade show, whatever,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't actually go to production before actually gauging how much excitement people have on the floor, right? So I think the practice isn't different, it's just different technology. These days, digital, and you get exposure, people's personal devices, they don't have to physically show up at the trade show, but I think that's not, the practice isn't new completely, right? But like you said, right, this 1 year time to market is something that you don't put fake products just because it's easy, right? There's an accountability measure that you're only putting something there that you're willing to actually kind of follow through if enough people put in the pre-order. So maybe that would be a different question, which would be, well, how do you decide on what to render? Like, how do you even get to a place where you have a rendered future prototype that you're willing to share with people to test their willingness?
Yeah. I mean, I think like deciding exactly what to render probably is not as concerning, at least to us. I think like the cost spend is like not that high. I mean, this is the whole point of like UX design, right? So if you're doing a traditional app, you want to get as much of that stuff nailed out and ironed out in the design phase, where all you're doing is moving around JPEGs and pixels in something like Figma, which is a tool that we use for apps and such. Because that, like, it might take a couple hours for the designer who's skilled to do that work, so you're spending there, but like it's far better than trying to actually spin up a prototype that actually works in code, and even more so with hardware. So yeah, I guess like the rendering and the kind of UX back and forth, we're not too choosy about like ideas we want to run with too much. We definitely are willing to experiment a little bit.
Amar, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. My question is, how do you go about advertising the product? Was the CNET article enough for there to be like a large demand, or was there like a huge advertising budget or something?
So I think like it's definitely not. It's somewhere in the middle, for sure. We certainly don't have a massive advertising budget compared to, I'll just pick on Google. They're probably the biggest one. So I'll use my favorite example, CES. So 1 year at Google, 1 year at CES, I feel like it was 2018 or 2019. So if you guys have followed smart home, or maybe I should say voice assistants, like Alexa's kind of the industry leader. They were first in very early, like I think they released it, was it 2014 or 15? Their smart home stuff came in 16, but Google was like maybe a half year or a year behind. But they just like decked out all of CES. So every single train, every single bus, every single booth, like they actually had people they hired. They were like wearing these painter outfits and wearing like, "Hey Google." They just spent so much money, and that's an advertising budget that is big. For us, the ways that we advertise, certainly PR, press releases, actual articles through reviewers, that's a big source. We've actually kind of capitalized very well on viral marketing through Instagram and our imagery. So people who build our products into their battle stations, it lends itself so well to basically viral free paid advertising, free advertising. Like we don't pay for a lot of that, if any of it. I think the rise of influencers through TikTok and Instagram that it's changed the equation a little bit. Like, you know, in 2015, 2016, everything was centralized around The Verge, CNET, all of these different periodicals or news sites. These days, a lot more is like influencer driven. So we've got a very capable team that works on that. And then there's traditional ads. So Facebook ads, Instagram ads, ads on Google. These are the sorts of things that we have some budget for, and you know, I think for our stuff, anywhere there's like a visual that couples with it. So actually another place which was really important for us in particular is if you've ever been to Best Buy shopping, they have actual products on display. I should hopefully most of you guys have been to Best Buy. I know the pandemic has been a while, and the obviously online's taken over, but once we actually got real kind of physical displays of our products in Best Buy, that was a huge win. Because like on a box, you sort of get an idea of what the product can do. Once you see it actually lit up, even if it's just 1 or 2 panels, you start to get a much better idea of like, oh wow, this is something that's unique and I've never seen before.
So Nathan, I'm mindful of the time, and it's always better to leave a few minutes early than a few minutes late. So why don't I take the opportunity to thank you again for taking the time and joining us from Eastern Standard, I guess, daylight savings time. And it's been good seeing you, and hope next time is less than 10 years apart.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, and it's great chatting with you and your students.
Thank you. And we'll keep an eye on what Nanoleaf is coming up, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be a delight.
Nice. TM.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you guys.